The chandelier light cast golden shadows across the elegantly arranged dining room as 18-year-old Maya Harrison stood at the head of the table, her hands trembling but her eyes resolute. The birthday cake before her remained uncut, 18 candles flickering in silent witness. "I have something I need to say," she announced, her voice surprisingly steady despite the visible tremor in her shoulders. Her stepfather Daniel's charming smile faltered for just a moment, a crack in the perfect facade he'd spent years constructing. Beside him, Maya's mother Diane laughed nervously, touching her pearls. "Sweetheart, maybe now isn't the time." Maya's grandfather Richard, sitting ramrod straight in his chair, raised his hand slightly. "Let her speak." His former military authority needed no volume to command the room. "Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from." 3 months earlier, the Harrison home stood as a testament to success in the affluent neighborhood: pristine landscaping, modern architecture, and large windows that revealed tasteful furnishings within. To outsiders, it represented the American dream. Successful businessman Daniel Harrison, his devoted wife Diane, and her daughter Maya, who had blossomed into a bright, promising young woman since Daniel entered their lives 5 years ago. Daniel Harrison was the community's golden son. His youth center provided programs for underprivileged teens. His charitable foundation funded half the town's community initiatives. But inside the immaculate walls of their home, a different reality existed, one of calculated movements, whispered conversations, and a tension that hummed beneath the surface like an electrical current. Maya moved through this environment with the cautious precision of someone navigating a minefield. Once outgoing and vibrant, she had gradually withdrawn over the past year. Her grades had slipped from straight as to concerning C's. Her once close group of friends had dwindled to just a few trusted confidants. The changes hadn't gone unnoticed by Maya's grandparents, Richard and Eleanor Wilson. Richard, a retired military colonel with decades of experience reading people and assessing threats, had expressed concerns to his wife of 40 years. "Something's off about him." Richard had told Eleanor after their first meeting with Daniel 5 years ago. "I can't put my finger on it, but I've seen that look before in men hiding something." Eleanor, the family's quiet observer, had nodded and begun keeping notes, small inconsistencies in Daniel's stories, the way his charm seemed to switch on and off like a light, how his generosity always seemed to come with invisible strings attached. But no one had any idea that in just 3 short months, the carefully constructed facade would come crashing down at Maya's 18th birthday party, forever changing the Harrison and Wilson families. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of Maya's bedroom, creating striped patterns across her desk as she finished her calculus homework. Once her favorite subject, math had become just another chore to complete, another performance required to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. Her phone buzzed with a text from her cousin Aiden. "How's it going, May? Law school's killing me, but I'm thinking about you. Call soon?" Maya smiled, her first genuine smile that day. Aiden Wilson was more like an older brother than a cousin. His father had died in military service when Aiden was just 12, and Richard and Eleanor had practically raised him alongside their own children. Now, in his second year of law school across the country, Aiden remained Maya's most trusted confidant. "Hanging in there?" she typed back. "Miss you." What she didn't type was, "I need help. I'm scared. I've discovered something terrible." A knock on her bedroom door made her jump. Her mother peeked in, her smile bright but her eyes carrying that nervous energy that had become her permanent state. "Daniel's going to be late tonight, honey." Another fundraiser for the youth center. Diane Harrison adjusted her pearl earring, a gift from Daniel on their first anniversary. "I was thinking we could have a girls' night. Maybe watch that new Netflix show everyone's talking about?" Maya nodded, forcing a smile. "Sounds good, Mom." Diane hesitated, hovering in the doorway. A flash of something, perhaps awareness, perhaps concern, crossed her face. "Is everything okay, Maya? You've been so quiet lately." For a brief moment, Maya considered telling her mother everything. The words bubbled up in her throat, but then she remembered all the times her mother had chosen not to see, chosen not to question, chosen Daniel's version of reality over anyone else's. Just stressed about college applications, Maya lied smoothly. Relief washed over Diane's face, the relief of someone who didn't want to look beneath the surface. "You'll get into your first choice, honey. You're brilliant." She blew a kiss and closed the door. Maya waited until her mother's footsteps faded down the hallway before opening her laptop. Hidden in a folder labeled Calculus Study Guides, behind 3 password protections, sat the evidence she'd discovered 3 weeks ago. It had been an accident, really. Daniel had asked her to print some documents from his home office computer while he took an important call. He'd left his secondary email account open, the one he used for youth center business, not his main account. A notification had popped up with the subject line, "Payment confirmation, do not reply." Curiosity and something deeper, an instinct she couldn't name, had made her click it. What followed was a rabbit hole of discoveries. Messages between Daniel and young people from his youth center, evidence of what could only be described as emotional manipulation and exploitation, financial transactions, and most damning, encrypted files with naming conventions that made her stomach turn. Maya had taken screenshots, downloaded what she could to a USB drive, and spent the following weeks gathering more evidence when Daniel was away. The deeper she dug, the worse it became. Some of the teens were barely 15, vulnerable kids from troubled homes who had turned to Daniel's youth center for guidance and support. The sound of the garage door opening jolted Maya back to the present. She quickly closed the hidden folder and switched to her calculus homework just as she heard Daniel's voice booming from downstairs. "Where are my two favorite ladies?" Maya took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and prepared to play her role in the family performance. She'd gotten quite good at it, smiling at the right times, laughing at Daniel's jokes, pretending she didn't see the way he looked at her when her mother wasn't watching. Downstairs, Daniel Harrison set his briefcase on the kitchen counter and kissed Diane on the cheek. At 42, he cut an impressive figure, tall, athletic, with just enough gray at his temples to suggest wisdom rather than age. His custom suit fit perfectly, and his smile revealed teeth whitened to an unnatural brightness. "The fundraiser was a huge success," he announced, loosening his tie. "We raised enough to expand the mentorship program to 2 more schools." "That's wonderful, Daniel." Diane beamed with pride. "I've always said your youth center is changing lives." "It certainly is," he agreed, his expression momentarily shifting to something darker before returning to its practiced charm. "Where's our girl?" "Studying. College applications have her stressed." Daniel nodded, glancing toward the staircase. "She works too hard, but that's our Maya, always the perfectionist." The way he said, "our Maya," made Diane smile with familial pride. She didn't notice how his eyes lingered on the staircase, calculating. "I thought I'd check on her," Daniel said casually. "See if she needs help with applications. I still have some connections at Princeton." "You're such a good father to her," Diane said, squeezing his arm affectionately. "I don't know what we'd have done without you these past 5 years." Daniel kissed his wife's forehead. "You never have to find out." As he climbed the stairs toward Maya's room, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the message, a brief frown crossing his face before he deleted it and continued upward. Maya heard the heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching her door. She quickly closed her laptop, grabbed a random book from her shelf, and was pretending to read when the knock came. "Come in," she called, her voice carefully controlled. Daniel entered with that easy smile that had charmed an entire community. "There's my brilliant girl. Your mother says you're stressing about college." Maya nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "Just want to make sure I have options." Daniel sat on the edge of her bed, too close as always. "You know I can make a call to my friend on Princeton's admissions board. One word from me about your special qualities, and you'd be in." The implication hung in the air between them. Maya's skin crawled, but she maintained her composure. "I want to get in on my own merits." "Admirable." Daniel's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "But the world doesn't work that way, Maya. Sometimes we need help from people with influence, people who can open doors." He placed his hand on her knee, squeezing slightly. "People who have invested in our futures." Maya shifted away, disguising the movement as reaching for a pen. "I should get back to studying." Daniel stood, smoothing his slacks. "Of course. Oh, by the way, I've been meaning to ask, have you been on my office computer recently?" Maya's heart stuttered, but years of hiding her feelings served her well. "Just that time you asked me to print something." "Why?" Daniel studied her face with an intensity that belied his casual tone. "Some files seem to have been accessed. Probably just a glitch." He paused. "Remember our discussion about privacy, Maya? How important it is to respect boundaries in a family." "Of course," she answered, meeting his gaze steadily. "Good girl." His smile returned. "Your birthday's coming up soon. 18? What a milestone. Almost an adult, but not quite there yet." He headed for the door, then turned back. "By the way, your grandmother called. She and your grandfather are planning something special for your birthday." Eleanor always did have a flair for celebrations. After Daniel left, Maya released the breath she'd been holding. She needed to be more careful. Daniel was suspicious. She also needed to accelerate her plans. Once the evidence was secure, she would need allies. Her grandparents were the obvious choice, but involving them meant exposing them to Daniel's wrath. Her mother was too deep in denial to be reliable. That left Aiden. She picked up her phone and texted, "Can you come home for my birthday next month? It's really important." His response came quickly. "Wouldn't miss it. Everything okay?" Maya stared at the screen. How could she possibly explain over text? Not really. Need to talk in person. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, "I'll be there a few days early. Hang tight, May." Maya clutched the phone to her chest, relief washing over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. The week before Maya's birthday, The tension in the Harrison household had reached an unbearable level. Daniel was working late most nights, and when he was home, his charming facade occasionally slipped to reveal irritation and suspicion. Diane fluttered anxiously between her husband and daughter, trying desperately to maintain the illusion of family harmony. Maya had secured her evidence, creating multiple backups of the files she'd discovered. The USB drive containing everything was hidden in the hollowed-out copy of Jane Eyre on her bookshelf, a hiding place inspired by her own mother's teenage diary, which Diane had once shown her. On Tuesday evening, as Maya sat at her desk reviewing her evidence one final time, she heard raised voices from downstairs. Curious, she crept to the top of the staircase to listen. Absolutely ridiculous, Diane. Daniel's voice had that dangerous smoothness it acquired when he was truly angry. The girl is obviously making up stories for attention. I'm just saying what Mrs. Patel told me. Diane responded, her voice quavering. She said Maya seems withdrawn in class, that her grades are slipping. She asked if everything was okay at home. And what did you tell her? Daniel's question cut like a knife. That of course everything is fine. That Maya is just stressed about college applications, like I told you. A pause, then Daniel's voice again, softer now. Diane, you know how much I love you and Maya, how much I've sacrificed to give you both the life you deserve. I know, Daniel. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have. His tone shifted to concern. I'm worried about Maya too. She's been so secretive lately, spending all that time alone in her room. Have you checked her social media? At her age, there are so many negative influences. Maya's hands clenched into fists. The manipulation was so transparent, yet her mother couldn't see it. Maybe I should, Diane said, sounding uncertain. Let me. I deal with troubled teens every day at the center. I know what signs to look for. A pause. Has she said anything strange to you? About me, perhaps? Maya held her breath, waiting for her mother's response. No, nothing like that. Diane sounded confused. Why would she? Teenagers sometimes create fantasies when they're struggling with stress. They can misinterpret normal interactions, especially with step-parents. Daniel's voice had taken on an educational tone, as if he were explaining a well-known psychological phenomenon. It's actually quite common for girls Maya's age to develop inappropriate attachments to father figures, then become confused or hostile when those feelings aren't reciprocated. Maya felt sick. She knew exactly what Daniel was doing, creating a preemptive defense against any accusations she might make. You don't think? Diane's voice trailed off. I'm not saying that's happening with Maya. Daniel backpedaled smoothly. I'm just saying we should be vigilant, especially with her birthday coming up. 18 is a volatile age, not quite adult, but wanting adult freedoms without adult responsibilities. Maya retreated to her room, quietly closing the door. She checked her phone. Aiden would be arriving tomorrow. Just one more day of maintaining the facade, of pretending not to know what she knew. The next morning, Maya came downstairs to find Daniel cooking breakfast, another performance in his role as devoted stepfather. There she is, he exclaimed cheerfully. I made your favorite blueberry pancakes. Diane sat at the kitchen island, makeup carefully applied to hide the shadows under her eyes. Isn't that thoughtful, Maya? Maya nodded, taking a seat as far from Daniel as possible. Thanks. Daniel placed a plate in front of her, leaning closer than necessary. Nothing but the best for my girl, he said, his voice pitched for Maya alone. Just remember that. The threat was unmistakable. Maya picked at her food, counting the hours until Aiden's arrival. Daniel watched her with calculated concern. Not hungry, sweetheart? You've barely touched your breakfast. Just excited about Aiden coming, Maya said, forcing herself to take a bite. And Grandma and Grandpa's party. Daniel's smile flickered. Ah, yes, the Wilson family reunion. Always an interesting experience. He turned to Diane. Your father still watches me like I'm about to steal the silver. Diane laughed nervously. That's just Dad. Once a military man, always assessing threats. Is that how he sees me? As a threat? Daniel's tone remained light, but his eyes hardened. Of course not, Diane reassured him. He's protective, that's all. Well, he has nothing to worry about. Daniel refilled Diane's coffee cup. I've protected his girls for 5 years now. Better than your first husband ever did. Maya's fork clattered against her plate. Don't talk about my dad like that. The kitchen fell silent. Daniel turned slowly to face her, his expression a careful mask of surprise and hurt. Maya, Diane exclaimed. Daniel didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry, Maya, Daniel said, his voice dripping with false contrition. That was insensitive of me. I know how much you still miss your father. Maya stood, unable to maintain the charade any longer. I need to get ready. Aiden's flight lands at 11. As she headed for the stairs, Daniel called after her. Do you need me to drive you to the airport? No, Maya said without turning. Grandpa's picking me up. In her room, Maya texted Aiden. Grandpa and I will meet you at arrivals. Can't wait to see you. Already on the plane, came the response. Window seat next to a guy who snores. Living the dream. See you soon, May. Maya smiled, then began preparing for the day that would change everything. She retrieved the USB drive from its hiding place and slipped it into the pocket of her jeans. Whether she intended to reveal everything at the birthday party or not, she needed to be ready. Daniel was getting suspicious, and time was running out. Richard Wilson's silver Lexus pulled into the Harrison driveway precisely at 10:15 a.m. Maya was waiting on the front steps, having escaped the house before Daniel could find some reason to delay her. Richard stepped out of the car, tall and straight-backed despite his 70 years. His silver hair was still cut in the military style he'd maintained since his days as a colonel, and his gaze assessed the Harrison house with the practiced scan of someone evaluating a strategic position. "Grandpa!" Maya hurried to embrace him, feeling safer than she had in weeks. Richard hugged her tightly, then held her at arm's length, his eyes searching her face. "You've lost weight," he observed, never one to soften his assessments. "College stress," Maya said, the lie coming automatically now. Richard's expression showed he didn't believe her, but he didn't press. "Let's get your cousin. His flight's on time for once." As they drove to the airport, Richard maintained a careful conversation about neutral topics: Maya's college applications, Aiden's law school experiences, Eleanor's plans for the birthday celebration. But as they neared the airport, he cleared his throat. "Maya, is there something you need to tell me?" Maya's hands tightened in her lap. "Why do you ask?" "I've been reading people for 50 years, both in combat and in boardrooms. You're carrying something heavy." He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." For a moment, Maya considered unloading everything, showing him the USB drive, explaining what she'd discovered. But the airport exit was approaching, and this wasn't a conversation to have in a moving vehicle or a crowded terminal. "After Aiden gets here," she said finally. "I need to talk to both of you." Richard nodded, accepting this answer. "We've got your back, Maya. Never forget that." The arrival terminal was busy with Thursday morning travelers. Maya scanned the crowd anxiously until she spotted Aiden's tall figure emerging from the security area. At 25, Aiden Wilson looked like a younger version of his uncle, the same military bearing despite never having served, the same penetrating gaze. His law school attendance hadn't softened his athletic build or his protective instincts. "There's my favorite cousin," he called, wrapping Maya in a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. When he set her down, his smile faded slightly as he assessed her appearance. "You okay, May? You look tired." "Just stressed," Maya said, the familiar excuse ready on her lips. Aiden exchanged a glance with his uncle, a silent communication passing between them. "Well, I'm here now," Aiden said, slinging his arm around Maya's shoulders. "And I've got 2 whole weeks before I have to head back. Plenty of time to solve whatever's bothering you." As they walked to the parking garage, Aiden kept up a steady stream of law school anecdotes, but Maya noticed how his eyes kept returning to her, evaluating. She also noticed how Richard positioned himself, always slightly in front, always scanning their surroundings. The colonel's instincts never truly faded. In the car, once they were heading back toward town, Aiden's tone changed. "So, what's really going on, Maya? And don't say nothing or college stress. Neither of us is buying it." Maya looked out the window, watching the highway barriers flash by. "Not here," she said quietly. "When we get to Grandma and Grandpa's." Richard nodded, meeting Aiden's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Eleanor's making lunch. We'll talk then." The rest of the drive passed in a more comfortable silence. Maya felt the USB drive pressing against her leg through the pocket of her jeans, a small object carrying an enormous weight. Eleanor Wilson was waiting on the porch when they arrived, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the spring breeze. At 68, she maintained the elegant composure that had served her well through decades as a military wife, and later as the chairwoman of multiple charitable foundations. "There's my grandson," she exclaimed, embracing Aiden. "Law school agrees with you, you've filled out." She turned to Maya, her warm smile faltering slightly as she took in her granddaughter's appearance. "Maya, darling, come inside. I've made your favorite chicken salad." The Wilson home was a stark contrast to the Harrison household. Warm, lived in, with photographs chronicling decades of family history. Maya had always felt safe here, surrounded by evidence of a love that was unconditional rather than transactional. Lunch was served in the sunroom overlooking Eleanor's prized garden. The conversation remained light as they ate, but Maya felt the weight of unspoken questions hanging over the table. Finally, as Eleanor served coffee, Richard cleared his throat. "Maya has something to tell us," he said simply. Eleanor set down the coffee pot, taking her seat. "We're listening, dear." Maya looked at the 3 faces watching her, her grandparents and cousin, the people she trusted most in the world. She reached into her pocket and placed the USB drive on the table. "This contains evidence that Daniel has been exploiting teenagers from his youth center." The words tumbled out, direct and unadorned. "He's been grooming vulnerable kids, manipulating them. There are financial transactions, inappropriate messages, and She swallowed hard. Worse. Silence fell over the sunroom. Richard's expression hardened, but he didn't appear shocked. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, as if receiving confirmation of a long-held suspicion. Aiden leaned forward, his legal training evident in his focused gaze. "Start from the beginning," he said gently. "How did you discover this?" Maya explained everything: the accidental discovery, her subsequent investigation, the files she'd copied, and Daniel's growing suspicion. As she spoke, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, replaced by a new fear that now her family was at risk too. "He's been setting up a defense," she concluded, "telling my mom that I might make up stories about him because I'm confused or seeking attention. She believes him, of course. She always does." Richard stood, pacing the sunroom with military precision. "I knew something was off about him from the beginning. I should have pushed harder." Eleanor reached for his hand as he passed. "We all sensed something, Richard, but without evidence." "We have evidence now," Aiden said, tapping the USB drive. "May I?" Maya nodded, and Aiden took the drive to Richard's study to examine its contents on a computer. The three remaining family members sat in tense silence until he returned 10 minutes later, his face grim. "It's worse than she said," he confirmed, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is enough for a criminal investigation. Multiple counts of exploitation of minors, financial fraud, possibly blackmail. What do we do?" Maya asked, suddenly feeling very young despite her approaching 18th birthday. Richard and Eleanor exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that comes from decades of partnership. "We need to be strategic," Richard said finally. "Daniel has influence in this town, connections, money. If we don't handle this carefully, he could escape consequences or, worse, retaliate." "Your birthday party," Eleanor said suddenly. "Everyone will be there: Judge Simmons, Chief Bennett, the district attorney, Maya's school counselor. We can present the evidence to them all at once, in a public setting where Daniel can't control the narrative." "That seems theatrical," Aiden objected. "Shouldn't we just take this to the police?" "The chief of police is Daniel's golf partner," Richard explained. "We need to create a situation where multiple authorities see the evidence simultaneously, so no one can bury it." "But what about Mom?" Maya's voice cracked. "She'll be devastated, humiliated." Eleanor moved to sit beside Maya, taking her hands. "Your mother will survive this, Maya. She's stronger than she appears, and she needs to face the truth, painful as it may be. In the meantime," Richard said, "you should stay here with us." "I don't want you in that house with him." Maya shook her head. "If I suddenly move out, he'll know something's wrong. He might destroy evidence or flee. I need to keep pretending everything's normal until the party." Aiden and Richard began to protest, but Eleanor raised her hand. "Maya's right. 3 more days of maintaining the facade is safer than alerting Daniel to our knowledge." She squeezed Maya's hands. "But you'll check in with us every few hours, and at the first sign of danger, you call immediately. Understood?" Maya nodded, grateful for her grandmother's practical approach. "Understood. I'll contact some colleagues from law school," Aiden said. "Get their advice on how best to preserve the chain of evidence." He put his hand on Maya's shoulder. "You're incredibly brave, May. Not many people would have had the courage to gather this evidence or come forward." Maya felt tears threatening for the first time. "I was so scared no one would believe me. He's so good at making everyone think he's perfect." "We believe you," Richard said firmly. "We've always believed you, even before we had proof." As Maya prepared to return home that evening, she felt simultaneously lighter and heavier, relieved to have shared her burden, but now carrying the responsibility of maintaining her act for 3 more days. The birthday party that had once seemed like just another performance in the Harrison family theater had become something else entirely, the stage for a long overdue reckoning. The morning of Maya's 18th birthday dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself refused to acknowledge the darkness that was about to be exposed. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing what she would say and do at the party that evening. The past 2 days had been a masterclass in deception, pretending everything was normal while texting updates to her grandparents and Aiden. Daniel had been unusually attentive, bringing her breakfast in bed, asking about her college applications, even offering to help with her calculus homework. His performance as the doting stepfather had intensified, as if he sensed something was coming and was reinforcing his public persona. A soft knock on her door preceded her mother's entrance, carrying a small gift-wrapped box. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Diane said, sitting on the edge of the bed. 18 years. I can hardly believe it." Maya sat up, accepting the gift with a genuine smile. Whatever was about to happen, she knew her mother loved her, even if that love was compromised by fear and denial. "Open it," Diane urged. Inside the box was a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny book that opened to reveal the inscription. "Every story has a hero. You're mine, Mom." Maya felt tears threatening. "It's beautiful. It was my grandmother's," Diane explained, helping to fasten it around Maya's wrist. "She gave it to me when I turned 18 and now it's yours." She brushed Maya's hair back from her face. I know things have been tense lately, but I want you to know how proud I am of you, how much I love you. Maya hugged her mother tightly, wishing she could protect her from what was coming. I love you too, Mom. Diane pulled back, wiping away a tear. Well, enough sentimentality. You need to get ready. Your grandparents' party is at 7, but Daniel has a little family celebration planned for lunch. Maya's stomach clenched. What kind of celebration? Just the 3 of us at Marino's, your favorite restaurant. Diane stood, smoothing her slacks. Daniel has a special gift for you. He's been very mysterious about it. After her mother left, Maya texted Aiden. Lunch at Marino's with Mom and Daniel. Then party at 7. Everything in place? The response came quickly. All set. Judge Simmons, Chief Bennett, D.A. Clark, all confirmed. Grandma invited Ms. Patel and 3 board members from the youth center. Keep your cool at lunch. I'll see you at the party. Maya took a deep breath, then got out of bed to prepare for what would be the most important day of her life. Marino's was busy for a Thursday afternoon, but Daniel had secured their usual table by the window, visible to everyone entering the restaurant, perfect for maintaining his public image as devoted family man. He stood as Maya and Diane approached, pulling out chairs for both of them with practiced gallantry. The birthday girl arrives, he announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. 18 years old. Where did the time go, Diane? Maya's mother smiled, but Maya noticed the tension around her eyes. It certainly flew by. I've taken the liberty of ordering champagne, Daniel continued. Just a glass for Maya, of course. We're celebrating responsibly. The waiter appeared with the champagne, and Daniel proposed a toast. To Maya, brilliant, beautiful, and on the cusp of an extraordinary future. May your path always be as bright as your potential. The words were perfect, the delivery flawless. To anyone watching, they were the picture of family harmony. Successful stepfather, devoted mother, cherished daughter. Maya sipped her champagne and maintained her smile, counting the hours until the mask would be ripped away. After their meal, Daniel signaled to the waiter, who brought a small gift box to the table. Unlike her mother's gift, which had been wrapped in simple blue paper, Daniel's was an elaborate presentation. Expensive wrapping paper, a perfect bow, a gift clearly meant to be opened in public. For the most important young woman in my life, Daniel said, sliding the box across the table. Maya unwrapped it carefully, aware of her mother watching with anticipation and several nearby diners observing with indulgent smiles. Inside was a white gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a lock. It's beautiful, she said automatically, though the symbolism made her skin crawl. Allow me, Daniel said, standing to fasten it around her neck. His fingers lingered on her skin a moment too long. The lock represents security, he explained for the benefit of their audience. My promise to always keep you safe. Maya caught the subtle threat beneath his words. She touched the pendant, forcing a smile. Thank you, Daniel. It's exquisite, Diane exclaimed, admiring the necklace. Maya, you'll be the envy of every girl at the party tonight. Speaking of the party, Daniel said, checking his watch, we should head home so Maya can prepare. Eleanor will never forgive us if the guest of honor is late. In the car, Maya sat in the back seat, fighting the urge to rip the necklace from her throat. Its weight felt like a collar. Daniel's attempt to brand her as his property just hours before she would expose him. The irony wasn't lost on her. At home, she retreated to her bedroom to prepare for the evening, carefully selecting a simple blue dress that had been a gift from her grandparents. She removed Daniel's necklace and placed it in her jewelry box, replacing it with a silver locket Aiden had given her last Christmas, containing a photo of her real father. Her phone rang, her grandmother. Everything set for this evening? Eleanor asked without preamble. Yes, Maya confirmed. Daniel suspects nothing. He gave me a necklace at lunch, a lock pendant. A brief silence, then Eleanor's voice, tight with controlled anger. He always did have a flair for symbolic gestures. Are you all right, dear? I'm managing. Maya sat on the edge of her bed. Grandma, what if no one believes me? What if they all take his side? Then we'll find another way, Eleanor said firmly. But they will believe you, Maya. The evidence is irrefutable, and you have more allies than you know. Miss Patel has been concerned about you for months. Judge Simmons has apparently had his own suspicions about some of Daniel's business dealings, and Chief Bennett was your father's friend. He wants to do right by his memory. And Mom, what will happen to her? Eleanor sighed. Your mother will have a difficult road ahead, Maya, but she's a Wilson before she's a Harrison. She'll find her strength again. After hanging up, Maya finished getting ready, her movements mechanical as she applied makeup and styled her hair. The girl in the mirror looked poised, mature, nothing like the terrified child she felt like inside. She touched the locket with her father's photo. I wish you were here, Dad, she whispered. I could use your courage tonight. Downstairs, she found Daniel in a new suit, directing the catering staff who had arrived to prepare appetizers for the after-party. The Wilsons were hosting the main celebration at their country club, but Daniel had insisted on continuing the evening at the Harrison home for more intimate conversation with close friends. "There she is," he exclaimed when he saw Maya, the woman of the hour. His smile faltered slightly when he noticed she wasn't wearing his necklace. "Where's your birthday gift?" "It didn't match my dress," Maya said smoothly. "I'm saving it for a special occasion." Daniel's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "This isn't a special occasion?" "The most special," Maya assured him, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "But blue and white gold clash. You taught me that, remember? When you took me shopping for Mom's anniversary present?" The reference to a shared memory, one of the few genuine positive interactions they'd had, seemed to mollify him. "Always the perfectionist," he said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, you look beautiful regardless." Diane descended the stairs in a new dress, clearly purchased to impress Eleanor Wilson and her social circle. "Are we ready? Your father texted that they're already at the club." Maya nodded, steeling herself for the evening ahead. "I'm ready." The Wilson family had been members of Oak Ridge Country Club for 4 generations, and Eleanor's influence was evident in every detail of the evening's arrangements. The conservatory had been transformed with elegant floral arrangements, subtle lighting, and tables arranged to facilitate conversation while maintaining clear sightlines to the main table. Maya recognized her grandmother's strategic thinking in the setup. Eleanor had positioned the event for maximum impact when the revelations came. The guest list was equally strategic. Alongside family friends were key community figures whose presence would ensure Daniel couldn't easily dismiss the accusations. Richard and Eleanor greeted them at the entrance, Richard embracing Maya with unusual emotion. "Happy birthday, Maya," he said, his voice rough. "Your father would be so proud of the woman you've become." Eleanor's hug was equally fierce. "You look lovely," she whispered before turning to Diane and Daniel with practiced social grace. "Diane, that color is perfect on you." "Daniel, the blue suit was a good choice." As they moved into the conservatory, Maya noticed Aidan standing with Judge Simmons, a tall, austere man who had been Richard's friend since their military days. Chief Bennett was by the bar, deep in conversation with the district attorney. Ms. Patel, Maya's school counselor, was chatting with 2 women Maya recognized as board members from Daniel's youth center. The stage was set. All the key players were in position. Daniel, ever perceptive, scanned the room with a slight frown. "Quite the influential crowd Eleanor's assembled," he murmured to Diane. "Your mother always did know how to leverage social occasions." "It's a milestone birthday," Diane replied, oblivious to the undercurrents. Of course she invited everyone important. The evening progressed according to Eleanor's careful choreography. Dinner was served, speeches were made, and Maya maintained her composure through it all, aware of the USB drive now in Aidan's possession and the plan they had crafted. After dessert, a spectacular cake decorated with symbols of Maya's interests and achievements, Eleanor stood to make a final toast. "Before we conclude the formal portion of our evening, I believe Maya has something she would like to say." This was the moment they had planned for. Maya rose, her hands surprisingly steady as she surveyed the assembled guests. Daniel's expression shifted subtly from benign interest to watchfulness. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with me tonight," Maya began, her voice clear in the hushed room. "Turning 18 is supposed to be about looking forward to the future. But first, I need to address something from the present." She took a deep breath. "For the past 5 years, I have lived with a secret that has become too heavy to bear alone." Daniel's chair scraped back slightly as he prepared to stand. Richard's voice cut through the room. "Remain seated, Daniel." The command in his tone, the voice of a colonel who had led men in combat, froze Daniel in place. A murmur ran through the guests as they sensed the shift in atmosphere. "My stepfather, Daniel Harrison, has been using his youth center to exploit vulnerable teenagers," Maya continued, the words she had rehearsed flowing with unexpected strength. "I discovered evidence on his computer 3 weeks ago. Inappropriate communications, financial transactions, and material that victimizes minors." The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Daniel stood, his charm transforming instantly to outrage. "This is absurd. Maya has been struggling with emotional issues. Her counselor can confirm it." He looked to Ms. Patel, who remained expressionless. "This is a cry for attention, nothing more." "Actually," Ms. Patel spoke up, "Maya's changed behavior is consistent with someone carrying a traumatic secret, not someone manufacturing one." Daniel's gaze darted around the room, assessing his support. One of his business associates rose to his defense. "This is preposterous. Daniel funds half the community programs in this town. He's dedicated his life to helping underprivileged youth." "A perfect cover," came Judge Simmons' grave voice from the back of the room, "and one that's been used before by predators with resources and social standing." Daniel turned to Diane, who sat frozen in shock. "Diane, tell them this is nonsense. You know Maya has been acting out. You know she needs help." Before Diane could respond, Aiden stepped forward, placing a laptop on the main table. "We have evidence," he announced. "Digital forensic evidence that's already been authenticated by 2 independent experts." Chief Bennett moved closer, his police training evident in his positioning between Daniel and the exit. "I'd like to see this evidence, son." "She's lying," Daniel shouted, his carefully cultivated image crumbling under pressure. "She's been unstable for months. Diane, tell them." All eyes turned to Diane Harrison, who looked small and confused in her expensive dress. I don't know," she whispered. "Maya wouldn't make this up, but Daniel, he's done so much for us." "He's done so much to us, Mom," Maya corrected gently. "To me, to the kids at his center, and he made you look the other way." Eleanor had moved to stand behind Maya, her hands resting protectively on her granddaughter's shoulders. Richard positioned himself between Daniel and the women of his family, his military training evident in his stance, ready to intercept any threat. Daniel changed tactics, his voice dropping to a reasonable tone. "Listen to me, everyone. Maya is an intelligent, creative girl, but she's going through a difficult time. She misinterpreted some communications from my youth center work, confidential messages about troubled teens that, taken out of context, might seem inappropriate. I've reviewed the evidence," Aiden countered. "There's no context that makes your messages to 15-year-old girls appropriate, Daniel." A new voice joined the conversation, Detective Chen from the county's Special Victims Unit, whom Eleanor had also invited. "Mr. Harrison, we've actually been investigating complaints about your youth center for the past month. Miss Wilson's evidence may be very helpful to our ongoing case." The color drained from Daniel's face as he realized he was cornered. His eyes darted to the exits, calculating his options. Chief Bennett noticed the change. "Don't do anything stupid, Harrison. There are 3 law enforcement officers in this room, and we're all armed." Daniel's mask slipped completely, revealing the cold, calculating person beneath. He turned to Maya, his voice low and vicious. "You ungrateful little..." Before he could finish, Richard stepped forward, physically blocking his path to Maya. "Choose your next words very carefully," Richard warned, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had faced worse threats than Daniel Harrison. The room was in chaos now, guests talking over each other, some expressing disbelief, others sharing that they had harbored suspicions about Daniel's youth center activities. Judge Simmons was conferring with Detective Chen, while Ms. Patel had moved to stand beside Maya in a show of support. Diane sat alone, tears streaming down her face as her carefully constructed world collapsed around her. Eleanor, ever the strategist, had anticipated this moment and quietly directed one of the waitstaff to escort Diane to a private room adjacent to the conservatory. Daniel, seeing his support evaporating, made one last desperate play. "Diane," he called across the room, "if you let this happen, you lose everything. The house, the cars, the status, it's all tied to me. You'll be nothing, just like before I found you." The naked threat silenced the room. Maya felt a surge of protective anger for her mother, who had endured poverty and struggle after her father's death, before Daniel had appeared with his promises of security and stability. To everyone's surprise, Diane slowly rose from her chair, her tear-streaked face hardening with newfound resolve. "I'd rather have nothing with my daughter than everything with you," she said clearly. "And I'm not nothing without you, Daniel. I never was." It was the turn in the tide, the moment Daniel Harrison lost his last potential ally. Detective Chen stepped forward, accompanied by Chief Bennett. "Mr. Harrison, we'd like you to come to the station to answer some questions about these allegations." Daniel's shoulders slumped in momentary defeat, but his eyes, when they met Maya's, were filled with cold hatred. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "A minor with emotional problems, manipulated by her estranged family. It won't stand up in court." "Actually," came a new voice from the entrance to the conservatory. "It will." A teenage girl stood in the doorway, Alicia Ramirez, 16 years old and a participant in Daniel's youth center programs. Behind her were 2 more teens, a boy and a girl, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. "We're here to confirm Maya's story," Alicia said, her voice shaking but resolute. "And to add our own." Daniel's face contorted with rage. He lunged toward the laptop containing the evidence, but Richard intercepted him with the quick reflexes of a former combat officer. In the ensuing struggle, Daniel's true nature was fully revealed as he fought with the desperation of a cornered predator. It took both Richard and Chief Bennett to subdue him, while guests looked on in shock at the violent display from a man who had cultivated such a carefully controlled public image. As Daniel was escorted from the room by Detective Chen and Chief Bennett, the conservatory fell into stunned silence. Maya stood at the center of it all, the weight of years of secrets finally lifted from her shoulders. She felt her grandmother's hands still on her shoulders, steady and supportive. Across the room, her mother sat with Ms. Patel, sobbing quietly as the full realization of what had been happening in her home began to sink in. Aiden was securing the laptop, ensuring the evidence remained intact for the investigation. Judge Simmons approached Maya, his austere features softened with what might have been respect. "Young lady, that was one of the bravest things I've ever witnessed, and in my 40 years on the bench, I've seen courage in many forms." The other guests began to recover from their shock, some approaching Maya to express support, others speaking in hushed tones about the evening's dramatic events. The three teenagers who had arrived to support Maya's claims were now seated with Detective Chen, who was taking preliminary statements. Eleanor, ever the consummate hostess even in crisis, somehow managed to create a semblance of order among the chaos. "I believe we should conclude the formal portion of the evening," she announced. "Those who wish to remain and offer support are welcome to do so. Those who would prefer to depart, we understand completely." As the crowd began to disperse, Richard approached Maya. "You did well, soldier," he said, using the affectionate term he'd called her since childhood. "Your father would be proud." Maya touched the locket containing her father's photo. "I felt him with me," she admitted. "And I had all of you. Always," Richard promised. "You will always have us." The birthday that had begun as a planned exposure of evil had transformed into something unexpected, a reclaiming of truth, a demonstration of courage, and the beginning of a healing process that would extend far beyond the Harrison and Wilson families. As Maya looked around at the remains of her 18th birthday celebration, the half-eaten cake, the scattered chairs, the small groups of people now engaged in intense discussion, she felt a strange sense of peace. The facade had been shattered, the perfect family image destroyed, but in its place was something real, something true, and for the first time in years, Maya Harrison could breathe freely. The days following Maya's birthday revelation passed in a blur of police interviews, legal consultations, and media attention that the Wilson family worked diligently to manage. Daniel Harrison was held without bail, deemed a flight risk due to his financial resources and the severity of the charges against him. The evidence Maya had gathered proved to be only the tip of the iceberg. As news of Daniel's arrest spread, more victims came forward. Teenagers from his current youth center and from his previous organizations in Portland, Chicago, and Phoenix. The pattern was consistent, targeting vulnerable young people, gaining their trust, exploiting them, and then using his financial resources and community standing to silence any accusations. For Maya, the immediate aftermath brought a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the truth was finally known, anxiety about the legal process ahead, and deep concern for her mother, who seemed to be collapsing under the weight of what she had failed to see. 3 days after the birthday party, Maya sat in her grandparents' sunroom, where she and Diane had temporarily moved. Aiden had taken a leave of absence from law school to help coordinate the legal aspects of the case, working closely with the district attorney's office. "How are you holding up, May?" Aiden asked, joining her with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, a childhood comfort they'd shared during difficult times. Maya accepted the mug gratefully. "Better than Mom. She barely comes out of the guest room." Aiden nodded, his expression somber. "She's processing a lot. The psychiatrist says it's a normal response to this kind of shock." "Is it shock, though?" Maya asked, the question that had been haunting her finally finding voice. Or did she know, on some level, and choose not to see it? Aiden considered this, his law school training evident in his measured response. "I think it's probably both. Humans are complicated, Maya. Your mom loved you, but she was also terrified of returning to the financial insecurity she experienced after your dad died. So she chose security over my safety," Maya said flatly. "I don't think it was that conscious a choice," Aiden countered gently. From what the therapist explained, it was more like selective blindness. Her mind literally wouldn't let her see what was happening because the consequences of seeing it were too threatening to her sense of stability. Maya sipped her hot chocolate, contemplating this. "I keep thinking about all the times I tried to tell her something was wrong, without actually saying it. The hints I dropped, the way I changed." She noticed, but she always accepted Daniel's explanations. "That's why predators like Daniel target people like your mom," Aiden explained. "They look for vulnerabilities, her fear of poverty, her desire to provide stability for you, her need to believe she'd made a good choice in a partner." He exploited those vulnerabilities masterfully. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Richard, who had spent the morning at the police station reviewing his statement. At 70, the former colonel looked older than he had just a week ago, the strain of recent events etched in the new lines around his eyes. "How's it going?" Aiden asked, rising to pour his uncle a cup of coffee. Richard sank into a chair, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. "The investigation is expanding. They've found evidence of similar behavior in Portland, 3 settlements with confidentiality agreements. 2 of the victims were prepared to violate those agreements to testify." "That's good news for the prosecution," Aiden noted, "and bad news for Daniel's defense," Richard agreed grimly. His attorney was at the station, trying to negotiate a plea deal. The DA isn't interested. Maya had been following the legal developments with keen attention, determined to understand every aspect of the process. What about Mom? Will she face charges for not reporting what was happening? Richard and Aiden exchanged a glance, the kind of look adults share when trying to decide how much to tell a child, despite the fact that Maya was now legally an adult. The DA has indicated he doesn't plan to pursue charges against your mother, Richard said carefully. There's no evidence she had direct knowledge of Daniel's activities with the youth center kids. As for any suspicions about your situation, he paused, choosing his words delicately. The law requires a higher standard than should have known in most cases. Maya nodded, relief mixing with lingering resentment. Part of her wanted her mother to face legal consequences for her willful blindness, while another part recognized how devastating that would be for a woman already shattered by recent events. Has she spoken to you at all? Aiden asked. Briefly, Maya admitted. She keeps apologizing, then crying, then apologizing for crying. It's exhausting. She's in shock, Eleanor said, entering the sunroom with a tray of sandwiches, and experiencing profound guilt. Give her time, Maya. She'll find her way through this. Maya wasn't so sure. The mother she'd known for the past 5 years had been a shadow of the strong, independent woman she remembered from childhood, the woman who had picked up the pieces after her father's death and somehow kept them afloat. That woman had gradually disappeared after Daniel entered their lives, replaced by someone who deferred to her husband's judgment and ignored her own instincts. What happens now? Maya asked, changing the subject. With the house, I mean, and our stuff. The police have finished processing your home as a crime scene, Richard explained. We can arrange for you to gather your personal belongings whenever you're ready. As for the house itself, he hesitated. It's in Daniel's name, Maya concluded. So we lose it. The assets are complicated, Aiden interjected. Given the nature of the charges and the civil suits that will likely follow from the other victims, there will be asset freezes and potentially forfeitures. But your mother's attorney is working to separate her legitimate assets from Daniel's, which means we'll have some resources, but nothing like before, Maya translated. Eleanor placed a sandwich in front of her granddaughter. You've never been materialistic, Maya, and your mother was happy before, with much less. It's not about the money, Maya explained, frustrated. It's about everything changing at once. My home, my school situation, my mother's mental state, my own legal obligations as a witness. It's overwhelming. One day at a time, Richard advised, the mantra he'd lived by through combat deployments and life's hardest challenges. Today, eat your lunch. This afternoon, we'll help you gather some clothes and personal items from the house. Tomorrow, we'll talk to your school counselor about options for completing your senior year with minimal disruption. The practical, step-by-step approach was quintessentially Richard, and Maya found it oddly comforting. The enormity of what had happened and what still lay ahead was too much to process all at once, but broken down into manageable tasks, it seemed possible to navigate. That afternoon, Maya entered her former home for the first time since the birthday party. The house felt different, hollow somehow, as if Daniel's presence had filled spaces she hadn't even been aware of. Yellow police tape still crossed his office door, but the rest of the house was accessible. Take your time, Eleanor advised, standing in the foyer with a stack of empty boxes. Just gather what you need for now. We can always come back for other things later. Maya moved through the rooms slowly, the memories of the past 5 years washing over her in waves. The kitchen where Daniel had made those performative family breakfasts. The living room where they'd posed for Christmas photos, smiling tensely for the camera. Her bedroom, the only space that had truly felt like hers, the sanctuary she'd retreated to when his presence in the house became too oppressive. She packed methodically, clothes, books, her laptop, the mementos that mattered most, the bracelet her mother had given her for her birthday, photographs of her real father, school projects she'd been particularly proud of. In her mother's room, she hesitated, unsure if she should gather things for Diane or leave that task for later. Deciding her mother might need some familiar comforts, she carefully selected a few items: the quilt Diane's grandmother had made, the framed photo of Maya's father that had mysteriously migrated from the bedside table to a drawer after Daniel moved in, the well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice that Diane read whenever life became stressful. As she placed these items in a box, Maya noticed something on her mother's dresser, a small notebook she didn't recognize. Curious, she opened it to find entries dating back nearly 2 years, written in her mother's neat handwriting. Caught Daniel watching Maya again today. When I mentioned it, he said he was just concerned about her weight loss. Should I believe him? Daniel angry when I suggested family therapy. Said Maya's issues are typical teenage rebellion and I'm overreacting. Maybe he's right? Found Daniel in Maya's room when she was at school. He said he was looking for dirty laundry, but something felt off. Am I being paranoid? Maya sank onto the edge of the bed, the notebook trembling in her hands. Her mother had noticed, had questioned, had doubted. but each entry ended with Diane talking herself out of her concerns, accepting Daniel's explanations, choosing to believe the facade rather than confront the painful reality. The last entry was dated just 2 days before Maya's birthday. Maya barely speaks to me anymore. Daniel says it's normal teenage behavior, but this feels different. What if something is really wrong? What if I've failed her somehow? I don't know what to do. Tears blurred Maya's vision as she closed the notebook and added it to the box. Her mother had been trapped in her own prison of doubt and fear, unwilling or unable to trust her instincts when they contradicted the narrative Daniel had so carefully constructed. By the time they returned to the Wilson home, Maya was emotionally exhausted but also experiencing a new understanding of her mother's perspective. She found Diane in the garden with Aiden, looking pale but more present than she had in days. "I gathered some of your things," Maya said, setting a box beside her mother. "Your quilt, some clothes, your favorite book." Diane looked up, her eyes red, rimmed but clear. "Thank you, Maya." She hesitated, then added, "I don't deserve your kindness." "I found your notebook," Maya said quietly. Diane's face crumpled. "Then you know I suspected something was wrong but did nothing." "You did something," Maya corrected gently. "You wrote it down. You questioned it. You just couldn't take the next step." "Because I was a coward," Diane whispered. "Because I was afraid of losing the security he provided. Because I didn't want to believe I'd chosen so badly, brought such danger into our home." Aiden, sensing the importance of this conversation, quietly excused himself, leaving mother and daughter alone among Eleanor's carefully tended roses. "Why didn't you come to me with your concerns?" Maya asked, the question that had been haunting her. Diane wiped away tears. "Because I was ashamed. Because I feared what your answer might be. Because Daniel had convinced me that any problems were in my imagination, my anxieties, my insecurities." She looked directly at her daughter, for perhaps the first time since the birthday revelation. "I failed you, Maya. I can never undo that, never make it right. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see him for what he is, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to rebuild your trust, if you'll let me." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the years of willful blindness or the damage that had resulted. But it was honest, perhaps the first truly honest conversation they'd had since Daniel entered their lives. And for Maya, honesty was the essential foundation for whatever relationship they might salvage from the wreckage. "One day at a time," she said, echoing her grandfather's wisdom. "That's all either of us can manage right now." As summer transitioned to fall, the legal proceedings against Daniel Harrison dominated the local news. The prosecution had built a formidable case, combining Maya's evidence with testimony from other victims and financial records revealing a pattern of exploitation spanning years in multiple states. Daniel's defense team attempted various strategies, claiming the evidence had been obtained illegally, questioning Maya's mental stability, suggesting a conspiracy by the Wilson family to regain control over Diane and her daughter. Each argument was systematically dismantled by the prosecution, supported by expert witnesses and the growing number of victims willing to testify. Maya herself provided a detailed deposition, recounting how she had discovered the evidence and explaining the subtle ways Daniel had attempted to manipulate and isolate her over the years. The process was grueling, forcing her to relive experiences she would rather have forgotten, but she remained resolute. "You're holding up remarkably well," Detective Chen commented after a particularly difficult session of questioning by Daniel's attorneys. "Many witnesses find this process too overwhelming." "I have good support," Maya explained, glancing to where her grandparents and Aiden waited in the courthouse hallway. "And I keep reminding myself that every question I answer helps build the case that will keep him from hurting other kids." Not all aspects of recovery were progressing as well. Maya had deferred her college applications, uncertain of her path forward while the legal proceedings continued. Diane had found a job as an administrative assistant at a local nonprofit, a significant step down from her previous position at Daniel's company, but a start in rebuilding an independent life. They had moved into a small apartment, their relationship still fragile but gradually strengthening as they navigated their new reality together. Richard and Eleanor remained steadfast in their support, hosting Sunday dinners, attending court hearings, and providing both practical assistance and emotional ballast. Richard, in particular, seemed to have found renewed purpose in protecting his family and ensuring justice was served. "I should have seen it sooner," he confessed to Maya one evening as they sat on his porch, watching the sunset. "I was trained to detect threats, to read people. I knew something was off about him from the beginning, but I didn't push hard enough." "You can't blame yourself, Grandpa," Maya insisted. "Daniel fooled a lot of people. He was very good at what he did." Richard's jaw tightened. "Not good enough to fool a man with my experience. I got complacent. Let social niceties override my instincts." He looked at his granddaughter, his expression pained. "I'm sorry, Maya. You believed me when it mattered most," she reminded him. "That's what counts." 3 months after her birthday revelation, Maya experienced her first major setback in the healing process. She had agreed to an interview with the college she had once considered her first choice, a courtesy arranged by Miss Patel, who had connections with the admissions department. The interview began well, with the admissions officer expressing genuine interest in Maya's academic achievements and extracurricular activities. But when the conversation inevitably turned to the gap in her recent academic performance, Maya found herself unable to explain. Words failed her. Her chest tightened. The room seemed to close in, the admissions officer's concerned face blurring as Maya struggled to breathe. Later, she would learn this was a panic attack, a common response to trauma triggers, but in the moment, it felt like she was dying. Ms. Patel, who had accompanied her to the interview, recognized what was happening and quickly intervened, guiding Maya from the room and helping her through breathing exercises until the worst of the attack subsided. "I don't understand," Maya gasped when she could finally speak again. "I've talked about Daniel in depositions, with detectives, with the psychiatrist. Why did I fall apart now?" "Healing isn't linear," Miss Patel explained gently. "Some days will be better than others. Some triggers will affect you more strongly. And this interview represented your future, something Daniel's actions have complicated." The setback was discouraging, but it served as an important reminder that recovery would be a long-term process, not an event. Maya began working more intensively with her therapist, developing coping strategies for triggers and learning to recognize the signs of anxiety before they escalated to panic. She also discovered unexpected sources of strength. Eleanor had begun researching trauma recovery, educating herself about how best to support her granddaughter. She connected Maya with a support group for young survivors of exploitation, where Maya found validation and understanding from peers with similar experiences. Aiden, who had extended his leave from law school to help with the case, had redirected his legal interest toward advocacy for exploitation victims. "This experience has changed my perspective," he explained to Maya. "I went into law thinking I'd work for some corporate firm, make a lot of money. Now I see how much need there is for attorneys who understand what victims face in the system." Even Diane was finding her way toward a new purpose. She had joined a parent support group and was considering training to become a victim advocate herself, channeling her guilt and regret into helping other families navigate similar crises. 6 months after the birthday revelation, Daniel Harrison's trial began. The prosecution presented a methodical case, combining digital evidence, financial records, and testimony from multiple victims. Daniel maintained his innocence, appearing in court in a modest suit instead of his usual designer attire, his expression carefully crafted to convey wrongful persecution. Maya testified on the third day, facing her stepfather across the courtroom for the first time since his arrest. His eyes bored into her as she recounted her discoveries and experiences, silently communicating threat and hatred. But Maya did not falter. Surrounded by her family in the gallery and fortified by months of preparation, she delivered her testimony with composure and clarity. "Ms. Harrison," Daniel's attorney began during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you had a difficult relationship with your stepfather? That you resented his authority and the boundaries he set?" "I had a difficult relationship with Mr. Harrison because he was inappropriate with me and other young people," Maya corrected calmly. "I resented not his authority, but his abuse of it." The defense attorney tried another approach. "You were failing several classes before these allegations emerged. Isn't it possible you fabricated these claims to deflect attention from your academic struggles?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "My grades declined because living in constant fear affects concentration. As for fabrication, the evidence speaks for itself. I didn't create those files or communications, I merely found them." Throughout the questioning, Maya maintained her composure, even as the defense attorney implied she was unstable, attention-seeking, or manipulated by her grandparents. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, Judge Simmons, not the judge presiding over the case, but present in the gallery as both an official observer and a personal supporter, gave her a nearly imperceptible nod of approval. The trial lasted 3 weeks, with national media covering its most dramatic moments. Throughout the proceedings, more victims came forward, some willing to testify, others providing statements to be considered during sentencing if Daniel was convicted. When the jury returned after just 6 hours of deliberation, the courtroom was packed with observers. Maya sat between her mother and grandmother, with Richard and Aiden directly behind them, a physical shield of family support. On the count of exploitation of a minor, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of possession of child sexual abuse material, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of financial fraud related to the Harrison Youth Foundation, we find the defendant guilty. The verdicts continued, guilty on all counts. Daniel's face remained impassive, but his hands gripped the defense table so tightly his knuckles whitened. When the judge ordered him to be taken into custody until sentencing, he finally turned to look directly at Maya, his expression a mixture of hatred and disbelief that she had actually succeeded in bringing him down. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements from the family. Richard handled the media with military precision, delivering a brief comment that focused on the broader implications rather than personal details. Today's verdict sends an important message to those who would exploit their positions of trust and authority. No amount of money, social standing, or carefully constructed facade can ultimately shield predators from justice. We're grateful to the prosecution team, the brave witnesses who came forward, and especially to my granddaughter, whose courage initiated this process. The sentencing hearing 3 weeks later delivered the final chapter in Daniel Harrison's legal story. 25 years without possibility of parole, asset forfeiture, and registration as a sex offender upon eventual release. The judge's comments were scathing, highlighting the calculated nature of Daniel's crimes and his complete lack of remorse. For Maya, the sentencing brought a complex mixture of emotions, relief that justice had been served, lingering anger at the years lost to fear and manipulation, and uncertainty about the path forward. The criminal proceedings had provided a structured focus for the past 9 months. With that chapter closing, she faced the challenge of defining her own future. What happens now? She asked Aiden as they walked through the park near her apartment, a week after the sentencing. Now you get to decide, he replied simply. College, gap year, work, whatever feels right to you. The point is, it's your choice now. No one controlling your options or manipulating your decisions. Maya considered this. I think I need more time before college. Everything still feels raw, unfinished. Then take the time you need. There's no rush. What about you? Are you going back to law school? Aiden nodded. Next semester. But I'm changing my focus to family law and victim advocacy. And I've applied for an internship with the prosecutor's office that handled Daniel's case. Maya smiled, genuinely happy for her cousin's newfound direction. You're going to be an amazing advocate, Aiden. You already are. As they continued their walk, Maya reflected on how much had changed in the past 9 months. Her mother was slowly rebuilding her confidence and independence. Her grandparents had become even more central to her life, their quiet strength, a foundation she relied on daily. And Maya herself had discovered reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more difficult days, more triggers to navigate, more moments of anger and grief for what had been lost. But there would also be freedom, the freedom to heal, to choose, to build a life defined by truth rather than facade. And that, Maya decided, was a worthy beginning for her adult life. 1 year after the fateful birthday party that had changed everything, the Wilson family gathered again to celebrate Maya's 19th birthday. The setting was modest compared to the previous year's event. The back garden of Richard and Eleanor's home, decorated with fairy lights and simple flower arrangements. The guest list was smaller but carefully chosen. Family members who had provided unwavering support, friends who had stood by Maya through the difficult months, professionals who had helped navigate the legal and emotional aftermath. Maya sat at the head of the table, watching the people she loved most in the world engage in comfortable conversation. Her mother, now working full-time as a trainee victim advocate, was discussing case management strategies with Detective Chen. Aiden, home for the weekend from law school, was debating legal theory with Judge Simmons. Mrs. Patel was chatting with Eleanor about trauma-informed educational approaches. The conversation flowed easily around topics that would have been unimaginable in polite society before their family crisis. There was no need for facade or pretense here. These people had seen the worst together and were now focused on creating something better. Speech time, Richard announced, tapping his glass gently. Maya stood, taking in the supportive faces around her. Thank you all for being here, not just today, but throughout this year. When I blew out my candles last birthday, I couldn't have imagined where we'd be now. She touched the locket containing her father's photo, which she still wore daily. This year has been the hardest of my life, but also the most authentic. For the first time since my dad died, I feel like I'm living in truth rather than illusion. She glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragement, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Their relationship had been rebuilt slowly over the past year, not a return to what was before, but the creation of something new, founded on honesty and mutual support. I've been thinking a lot about paths not taken, Maya continued, about what might have happened if I'd spoken up sooner, or if Daniel had been caught before he entered our lives. And that led me to wonder, what if we could create a different story for other families? What if children and teens could recognize warning signs earlier? And what if the adults in their lives actually believed them the first time they voiced concerns? The table had fallen silent, everyone focused on Maya's words. So that's what I've decided to do with my gap year. I'm working with Ms. Patel, and the school district to develop a program that teaches students to recognize manipulation and exploitation. And I'm partnering with Mom and her advocacy group to create resources for parents about believing their children, even when the truth is painful or inconvenient. Aiden raised his glass to Maya, turning personal tragedy into community protection. As glasses were raised around the table, Maya felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything she'd experienced before. The path ahead was challenging but clear, using her story to prevent others from experiencing similar trauma. After dinner, as guests began to depart, Maya found herself sitting on the porch swing with her grandparents. The spring evening was mild, the garden filled with the scent of Eleanor's roses. "I've been meaning to give you something," Richard said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small box, passing it to Maya. Inside was a silver pin in the shape of a shield, a miniature version of the colonel's insignia Richard had worn during his military career. "This is the first decoration I received as a young officer," he explained. "It was given to me by my commanding officer after I successfully led a mission to extract civilians from a dangerous situation. He told me that true courage isn't fearlessness. It's acting despite fear when something important is at stake." Maya touched the pin reverently. "Grandpa, I can't take this." "You've earned it," Richard insisted, his voice gruff with emotion. "What you did took more courage than many battlefield actions I've witnessed. You stood up to a predator who had psychological power over your entire family. You gathered evidence meticulously. You chose the moment to act strategically. And most importantly, you stayed the course through the aftermath, even when it would have been easier to retreat." Eleanor covered Maya's hand with her own. "We couldn't be prouder of you, dear, not just for what you did, but for who you're becoming because of it." As Maya pinned the shield to her sweater, she imagined an alternate timeline, one where Daniel's manipulation had been recognized earlier, where her mother had trusted her instincts instead of his explanations, where the adults in Maya's life had created a protective circle around her before damage could be done. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if we'd seen through Daniel sooner?" she asked her grandparents. Richard and Eleanor exchanged a glance, that silent communication of long-married couples who can read each other's thoughts. "I do," Richard admitted. "I imagine a scenario where I pushed harder when I first met him, maybe had my bureau contact investigate him more thoroughly before he became part of the family. And I imagine noticing Maya's discomfort sooner," Eleanor added, asking direct questions instead of observing from a distance. "I've been thinking about this for my presentation to the school board," Maya explained, "about creating a kind of what could have been scenario to help people understand the importance of early intervention." The alternative timeline took shape in Maya's mind as she spoke, a visualization exercise she'd been developing with her therapist to help process her experiences. In this alternate reality, Richard's military-trained instincts led him to investigate Daniel thoroughly before he became part of the family. Eleanor noticed Maya's discomfort during early family gatherings and created opportunities to speak with her privately. Maya herself, educated about grooming behaviors through school programming, recognized Daniel's manipulation tactics for what they were. Most significantly, in this alternate timeline, when Maya finally gathered the courage to confide her concerns to her mother, Diane believed her immediately, not because she had proof, but because she trusted her daughter's perceptions above a man she'd known for only a few months. The confrontation still occurred, but much earlier, before Daniel had fully established his financial and psychological control over the family. In this version, Richard and Eleanor immediately rallied around Diane and Maya, using their community influence to support rather than question the allegations. The aftermath was different too. Without years of manipulation and fear, Maya's academic performance never declined. Diane never lost her independence and self-trust. The legal process, while still difficult, didn't consume an entire year of their lives. The most critical difference, Maya concluded, is that in this alternate timeline, children are taught that their discomfort matters, that they should trust their instincts about people who make them uneasy, and adults are taught that believing victims is more important than maintaining comfortable illusions. Richard nodded thoughtfully. "That's a powerful framework for your presentation, Maya. It makes the abstract concept of prevention very concrete." "What's remarkable," Eleanor observed, "is that despite everything that happened in our actual timeline, you've arrived at a place of purpose and strength. Different path, similar destination." Maya considered this. "I don't know if I would have found this particular purpose without going through what I did, but I would have preferred the alternate timeline where other victims were spared because Daniel was stopped sooner." "That's why your work matters so much," Richard said simply. "You're creating that alternate timeline for future potential victims." As the evening drew to a close, Maya reflected on the journey of the past year, from terrified teenager to emerging advocate, from silent victim to powerful voice. The path had been painful, the cost high, but sitting on the porch swing with her grandparents, the silver shield pinned to her sweater catching the last light of day, Maya felt something she had nearly forgotten was possible. Hope. Hope not just for her own healing, but for the changes she might help create in her community and beyond. Hope that other families might recognize danger before it infiltrated their homes. Hope that other teenagers might find their voices sooner and be believed when they spoke. The following month, Maya gave her first formal presentation to a combined audience of educators, parents, and high school students. Standing at the podium in the school auditorium, she felt a momentary flash of anxiety, a remnant of the trauma that still occasionally surfaced at unexpected moments. But then she looked out at the audience and found her anchors, Richard and Eleanor sitting ramrod straight in the third row, Aiden beside them, giving her a subtle thumbs up, her mother on the end of the row, her eyes filled with a complex mixture of pride and lingering guilt, Detective Chen and Ms. Patel near the back, representing the professionals who had helped transform her private trauma into public protection. Maya took a deep breath and began. "The most dangerous prisons are built from silence," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I lived in such a prison for 5 years, trapped not by physical walls but by manipulation, fear, and the unwillingness of adults to see what was happening right before their eyes." As she spoke, weaving together her personal experience with research data about exploitation and prevention, Maya noticed the audience's reactions. Parents exchanging concerned glances, teenagers sitting up straighter, educators taking notes with increased urgency. By the time she reached her "what could have been" segment, contrasting her actual experience with the alternate timeline where intervention came earlier, Maya could see the message landing with impact. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was a roadmap for community action, for system change, for cultural shift. "We cannot change my past," she concluded, "but together, we can create a different future for the children and teenagers in our community. A future where they are taught to recognize manipulation, where they feel empowered to speak up, and where the adults in their lives believe them the first time, every time." The applause was thunderous, the standing ovation immediate. As Maya looked out at the audience, which included Richard's veteran support group members and Eleanor's social circle, all mobilized to spread her message, she felt the full circle moment of her journey. From silenced victim to powerful advocate, from isolated teenager to community catalyst. After the presentation, as students and parents lined up to speak with her, Maya's hand instinctively went to the locket containing her father's photo. She had carried his memory through the darkest periods, imagining his protection when she felt most vulnerable. Now, as she prepared to answer questions and share resources, Maya realized she was becoming a protector herself, using her hard-won knowledge to shield others from similar harm. It wasn't the future she had imagined on her 18th birthday, standing trembling before her family with a terrible truth to reveal. It was better. It was real. It was purpose born from pain. And that, Maya decided as she welcomed the first person in line with a genuine smile, was a birthday wish finally coming true. Maya's story reminds us that the most powerful changes often begin with a single voice willing to speak the truth, no matter how difficult. While this narrative explores fictional characters, the dynamics of exploitation, family denial, and the courage required to break cycles of abuse are very real. For parents, educators, and community members, Maya's journey offers important lessons. Listen to children when they express discomfort about adults in their lives. Watch for changes in behavior or mood that might indicate underlying problems. Create environments where young people feel safe to speak their truth without fear of dismissal or disbelief.